Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanksgiving. I take the eating part of it seriously, my mom takes the meal part of it seriously, and my grandma takes the football part seriously. No matter how you celebrate the holiday, it's a time for families to come together and be grateful for what you have. And maybe burn a few bridges with how racist or homophobic your uncle and or cousin is. You know, those normal Thanksgiving things. But do you know how it became a national holiday in the United States? Well, one woman made it happen. Sarah Josepha Hale. Let's get started. Sarah Josepha Buell was born on October 24th, 1788 in Newport, New Hampshire. Her parents were Gordon and Martha Whittlesey Buell. Gordon was a Revolutionary War veteran, Martha was a homemaker, and Sarah had an older brother named Horatio. Her parents were strong advocates for equal education for both sexes. So Sarah was educated by her mother and her brother, who was going to school at Dartmouth College, a private males-only Ivy League research university that is one of 9 colonial colleges charted before the American Revolution. He would come back from school and would teach Sarah what he learned at school. Interestingly about Dartmouth, it was originally established to educate Native Americans in Christian theology and the English way of life. Since Sarah was homeschooled, she got a higher and overall better education that was beyond what the average woman her age received. She was also a voracious reader. She would read whatever she got her hands on and noticed that, quote, "Of all the books I saw, few were written by Americans and none by women," end quote. And so from this, she was inspired from an early age to, quote, "promote the reputation of my own sex and to do something for my own country," end quote. I'm gonna tell you right now, her brother is awesome. When he graduated Dartmouth, he got his diploma. He then awarded Sarah a diploma and declared that she had earned her degree in the arts with the highest distinction. Sarah would say later about her brother sharing his textbooks with her that, quote, "He seemed very unwilling that I should be deprived of all his collegiate advantages," end quote. He gets Best Colonial Brother of the Year award right there. Sarah became a school teacher by the age of 18, which was already impressive because at the time, for reasons I genuinely don't quite understand, women were not accepted as teachers. I really don't understand that. Her father opened a tavern in Newport in 1811 and called it the Rising Sun. In her spare time, Sarah began writing poetry, and in that same year, she met lawyer David Hale. He was a book nerd himself, and he admired Sarah's intelligence. Unbelievably rare for that time period. They married at the Rising Sun on October 23rd, 1813, and they would go on to have 5 children. David in 1815, Horatio in 1817, Francis in 1819, Sarah in 1820, and William in 1822. Just freaking back to back to back to back to back. David, the husband, not the younger one, which I don't know if it was David the second or David Jr., it's just David, did not try to stifle his wife's intelligence. In fact, he encouraged and helped Sarah learn more. Quote, "We commenced soon after our marriage a system of study and reading which we pursued while he lived. In all our mental pursuits, it seemed the aim of my husband to enlighten my reason, strengthen my judgment, and give me confidence in my own powers of mind, which he estimated much higher than I. But his arbitration, which he bestowed on my talents, has been of great encouragement to me in attempting the duties that have since become my portion," end quote. Again, it's extremely weird that in the colonial age of America, a husband wanted his wife to be smart. She freaking scored. Duh. With the encouragement of her husband, Sarah continued to write poems, short stories, and articles that would be published in local newspapers. Unfortunately, the idyllic life ended in just 9 years. When Sarah was pregnant with William, David unexpectedly died from either pneumonia or a stroke in 1822, leaving Sarah a single mom of 5 kids. The oldest, David Jr., was only 7, and William was born only 2 weeks after her husband's death. Sarah is 34 at this time. She was so distraught about her husband's death that Sarah wore black for the rest of her life as a sign of her perpetual mourning. Since David didn't leave a large estate, and after a failed attempt to start a hat-making business, Sarah turned to poetry to make money. She published a collection of her poems called The Genius of Oblivion in 1823. At this point, the Masonic movement was underway, and her husband's Masonic friends helped pay for the publication and supported her throughout her literary career. The Masonic movement, better known as Freemasonry, is a fraternal order that brings men and women together to gain friendships, opportunities for advancement, and community progress. Sarah explains her decision to go into poetry instead of staying as a school teacher, which she had been till 1813, that quote, "Very few employments in which females can engage with any hope of profit, and my own constitution and pursuits made literature appear my best resource. I prepared a small volume of poems, mostly written before my husband's decease. These were published by the aid of the Freemasons, of which order he was a distinguished member," end quote. She began to submit stories and poems to literary magazines, and she quickly got the attention and respect of editors. In 1827, Sarah wrote and published her first novel, Northwood, A Tale of New England. This book depicted home life in the early era of America, was one of the first American woman novels, and it made Sarah one of the first novelists of either gender to write a book about slavery. Sarah's book compared the differences between life in the North and South, and later said about slavery, she called it, quote, "a stain on our national character," end quote. Surprisingly, at least to me, the reviews and public reaction to the novel were positive. I don't know if it was mainly in the North it was positive and kind of in the South positive, or only the North and none in the South, because maybe the book didn't get to the South. All I know is that the reviews were mainly positive. There was also an entire chapter dedicated to the fall tradition of Thanksgiving that was already popular in many parts of the nation. Remember this. The publication of Northwood cemented Sarah's literary career. The book did not only support New England values, but on her thoughts about slavery, supported the re-Africanization of slaves in the colony of Liberia, which was the first African republic to proclaim independence and Africa's first and oldest modern republic, and had been the main place that the American organization, the Society for the Colonialization of Free People of Color of America, which was founded by Robert Finley in 1813, that encouraged and supported the migration of freeborn blacks and emancipated slaves back to Africa. Now, this sounds awesome. Essentially, put them back home. But of course, the reason for it was to take care of the general view that free black people could not integrate into U.S. society, and current slave owners feared that the free blacks might help the enslaved blacks escape and rebel, and the whites believed the blacks were inferior, so they should be put back where they came from, or so help me.
Now put that thing back where it came from, or so help me!
Oh, God. Oh, and this idea was modeled from the earlier British colonialization of Africa. They wanted to resettle London's black poor. Anyway. As with any huge success, opportunities come, and Sarah was no different with the success of her book. Reverend John Blake praised the book and was inspired by it. He asked Sarah to be editor of his journal called Ladies Magazine. The only problem is that the magazine was in Boston, and of course Sarah is in New Hampshire, so she would have to move. Seeing the potential of this opportunity, Sarah packed her 5 kids and moved to Boston in 1828. Now, Sarah was a strong advocate for America, the nation, and the Union. You see, during the 1820s and 1830s, other American magazines compiled and reprinted articles from British journals, magazines, and newspapers. Sarah was among leaders of American editors that insisted on publishing American writers, and she herself wrote a lot of the material for each issue that included literary criticism, essays, sketches of American life, and of course, poetry. She accepted only original material, printed articles that to her thought could improve her readers, and asked for work from American female writers. She would later change the name of the magazine to American Ladies Magazine to reflect her editorial policies. Awesome thing I found, she preferred the title editress. She made up a whole name for herself. I'm gonna use that word. Her work at the magazine drew great praise from critic and feminist writer John Neal. He said in The Yankee, quote, "We hope to see the day when she editors will be as common as he editors, and when our women of all ages will be able to maintain herself without being obliged to marry for bread," end quote. While in Boston, Sarah became involved in many social causes. She supported the Boston Ladies' Peace Society, supported Elizabeth Blackwell, who became the first American female doctor, and don't worry, she is on my stupid long list of awesome women to talk about on here. She helped raise $30,000 for the completion of the Bunker Hill Monument, which she got most of the donations from asking her readers to donate $1 each. In 1833, she founded the Seaman's Aid Society, which helped to assist surviving families of Boston sailors who died at sea. This is not to be confused with the Boston Seaman's Friend Society, founded in 1827. She also worked to preserve George Washington's Mount Vernon plantation. She said that it was a symbol of patriotism that the North and South could support. Really quick side note, I've been here. That is the most beautiful, unbelievably beautiful. And we went into the stables and you could still smell the horses from there. Go to Mount Vernon and just stand there. And the fact that she helped to preserve it, which makes me think, were we really going to let Mount Vernon just decay? Crazy the things that you find out when you're researching history. She published her second collection of poems in 1830 titled Poems of Our Children. This collection included the poem Mary's Lamb, which was the original title for Mary Had a Little Lamb. You weren't expecting that, were you? Yep, she wrote that poem. That was another thing that I found out when I was looking this chick up. I was all like, she wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb? Oh, I'm doing her for sure. Which, quick side note here, because I did a deep dive, because you know me, I do deep dives. You guys might be singing in your head this.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow.
But that's not the original version. Let me explain. That version is set to a melody done by Lowell Mason in the 1830s, but his version is not the famous song sung today. Today, we commonly sing Lowell's version to the same tune as Merrily We Roll Along, which is the chorus from Good Night Ladies. This chorus has also been used in the famous song I've Been Working on the Railroad.
Been working on the railroad all the livelong day.
This is Sarah's original poem. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. He followed her to school one day. That was against the rule. It made the children laugh and play to see the lamb at school. And so the teacher turned him out, but he still lingered near and waited patiently about till Mary did appear. And then he ran to her and laid his head upon her arm as if he said, I'm not afraid. You'll keep me from all harm. What makes the lamb love Mary so? The eager children cry. Oh, Mary loves the lamb, you know, the teacher did reply. And you each gentle animal in confidence may bind, and you make them follow at your call if you are always kind. That's just sweet. I'm just saying. Now, I wouldn't be doing my thorough research job, well, if I didn't bring you the very unique debate about if Sarah actually wrote this poem. Let me explain. Okay, so this goes into the fact that we all know nursery rhymes got some dark, really messed up, disturbing backgrounds. It's not that this is a disturbing background, it's that it's just no different. But this one actually has a much lighter background. For freaking once. Here's the controversy. Mary was a real person. Mary Sawyer of Sterling, Massachusetts, born in 1806, who actually had a lamb that she loved, and it actually followed her to school one day, and because of the lamb, caused problems at school, and let the rest of the poem occur. Then, according to Mary, in 1876, at the age of 70, a young man named John Rollstone, who was the nephew of Reverend Lemuel Capon, who was visiting the school, and he was so pleased about the incident, I mean, who the heck wouldn't, that the next day rode his horse across fields back to the school and handed Mary a slip of paper which had specifically the first 12 lines of the famous poem written on it. Now, the only evidence of this is from Mary's memory, and this slip of paper has never been produced. And Mary said that she was the Mary in the poem only after it became widely successful. Even though there's zero evidence of this, the Redstone School, where Mary attended school and the lamb supposedly went to, was bought by Henry Ford. Yeah, that Ford Henry, and relocated it to a churchyard on the Wayside Inn Historic District. There's a 2-foot-tall statue representing Mary's little lamb in the town center. I mean, it's adorable. You gotta admit it. Even if the story is not true, it's freaking cute. Now, Sarah rebukes these claims. She said that the poem was her own creation and was roughly based on her own childhood. She also points out, quote, the incident of an adopted lamb following a child to school has probably occurred many times, end quote. Baby lambs did follow their little girls to school, which I think would be the freaking greatest thing on the planet. School's shut down. There's a lamb in here. We're all gonna have serotonin overload. Sarah was editor for the Ladies Magazine from 1828 to 1836. In 1837, because of financial difficulty, the magazine was bought by editor and publisher Louis Antony Godey. He turned the magazine into Ladies' Book, later Godey's Ladies' Book, which had been established in Philadelphia 7 years earlier, and he merged the two magazines. Even though the journal was in Philadelphia and Louis wanted Sarah to move there to edit the magazine, Sarah insisted on staying in Boston while her son William attended Harvard College. So she turned the offer down. But he clearly wanted her as his editor. So when her son graduated in 1841, Sarah then moved to Philadelphia to be editor for Godey's Ladies' Book. She stayed with the magazine for the next 40 years. During those 40 years, Sarah made Godey's Ladies' Book the leading American women's literary and fashion magazine for the next 4 decades, with 150,000 subscribers by the eve of the Civil War in 1860. Sarah continued to be a powerhouse in the editorial world to encourage women to focus their efforts in the domestic realm. Godey's Ladies' Book was mostly known for its conservative views. Since Sarah was the main editor writer and she did a lot of the articles in the magazine, a lot of her less popular views would be published. Sarah was an advocate for women, but she did not support the women's suffrage movement because she thought that women's participation in politics would limit their influence in the home. She instead believed in the, quote, secret silent influence of women, end quote, to sway male voters. However, she did use the magazine to continue her advocacy for the education of women and the right of women as property owners. Very unique flip-flop. Sarah hoped the magazine would educate women, quote, not that they may usurp the situation or encroach on the prerogatives of men, but that each individual may lend her aid to the intellectual and moral character of those within her sphere, end quote. Sarah was one of the early advocates for higher education for women. She persuaded her friend Matthew Vassar to hire more women teachers at his college, which she helped establish, so I think she kind of has a little bit of a say in this. Vassar College, which is a co-educational private liberal arts college in Poughkeepsie, New York. That just makes my mouth happy. Poughkeepsie. And just called for more overall women teachers. In 1851, she founded the Ladies Medical Missionary Society of Philadelphia, which was an organization that fought for a woman's right to go to a foreign land as a medical campaigner without the company of a man. I'm gonna go do some shots in Cambodia. You have to have a man present with you. Her biggest achievement was the Women's Record, sketches of all distinguished women from the creation to AD 1868, arranged in 4 eras with selections of authoresses of each era. Yeah. This was published in 1853 and is an encyclopedic volume of 229 notable women throughout world history and was based on the development of Christianity and emphasized how essential women's morality was to Christianity and argued that the woman was, quote, God's appointed agent of morality, end quote. Amen to that. Okay, Thanksgiving. Let's talk about it. The first known Thanksgiving type service was held by the Europeans in North America on May 27th, 1578 in Newfoundland. A couple more Thanksgiving type celebrations happened for the next almost half century when, after 10 weeks at sea, sailing from Plymouth, England with 102 passengers and crew known as Pilgrims, the Mayflower dropped anchor near the tip of present-day Cape Cod, Massachusetts on November 21st, 1620. The Pilgrims established the Plymouth Colony, the first permanent English colony in New England and the second permanent English colony in America after the Jamestown colony. The location was previously surveyed and named by, and this is just one of those fun things about history, Captain John Smith. That right there is why I love history so much. It's just these random, boop. I love when history does those things. In November of 1621, the Pilgrims had their first successful corn harvest. Governor William Bradford organized a celebration feast and invited a group of emerging Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit. The first Thanksgiving festival lasted 3 days, and though no exact menu of the first Thanksgiving meal exists, much of what we know that happened comes from Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow. Quote, our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, that so we might after a special manner rejoice together after we have gathered the fruit of our labor, at which time, among other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and among the rest their greatest king Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted, and they went out and killed 5 deer, which we brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others, end quote. Colonials need to learn to use periods. The second Thanksgiving celebration was in 1623 to mark the end of a long drought that threatened the year's harvest and was to give thanks for the miracle of a good harvest. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated one or more days of Thanksgiving a year. Then in 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by the United States. Then his successors, John Adams and James Madison, designated different days of thanks during their presidencies. New York in 1817 became the first of several states to officially adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday, but each was on a different day. And interestingly, the South remained unfamiliar with the tradition. So by the time Sarah comes into the picture, Thanksgiving was already being celebrated in most of the country. But again, it was on different days. Her advocacy began in 1846, and she stayed on it for the next 17 years. Like, this lady is stubborn. She wrote every single president that was in office for those next 17 years. In order: 12th President Zachary Taylor, 13th President Millard Fillmore, 14th President Franklin Pierce, 15th President James Buckman Jr., and 16th President, my man, Abraham Lincoln. 5 presidents, 17 years. Talk about a freaking crusade. Initially, her letters didn't persuade them, but when she wrote Lincoln on September 28th, 1863, she said, quote, "As the President of the United States has the power of appointments for the District of Columbia and the territories, also the Army and Navy and all American citizens abroad who claim protection from the U.S. flag. Could he not, with right as well as duty, issue his proclamation for a day of national thanksgiving for all the above classes of persons? And would it not be fitting and patriotic for him to appeal to the governors of all the states, inviting and commending these to unite in issuing proclamations for the last Thursday in November as the day of Thanksgiving for the people of each state? Thus, the great Union Festival of America would be established." End quote. She knows words very, very good. And that persuaded him enough that on October 3rd that same year, Lincoln issued a proclamation that urged Americans to observe the last Thursday in November as the day of Thanksgiving. Awesomely, the national holiday was considered a unifying day after the stress of the Civil War, which ended barely a year ago. Before Thanksgiving, the only national holidays at this time were George Washington's birthday and Independence Day. That's it. Christmas wasn't even around. Her efforts earned her the nickname Mother of Thanksgiving. And in her novel, Northwood, where she dedicated a whole chapter to the holiday, she described many of the classic dishes of Thanksgiving: a roasted turkey, gravy, and savory stuffing, chicken pie, pumpkin pie, pickles, which I find weird, cakes and preserves, and to drink, ginger beer, fruit wine, and cider. Smithsonian Institute National Museum of American Art curator of food history, Paula J. Johnson, says that Sarah was, quote, "key in bringing together and popularizing the Thanksgiving holiday with the menu featuring turkey and stuffing," end quote. During Sarah's tenure at Godey's Ladies Book, several important women contributed poetry and other writings, such as Elizabeth F. Elliott, Lydia Sigourney, Eliza Cook, Frances Sargent Osgood, and Caroline Lee Hentz. Though the magazine mainly featured women, plenty of men contributed as well, including Washington Irving, James Kirk Paulding, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Nathaniel Parker Willis, Oliver Wendell Holmes, William Gilmore Simms, and even Edgar Allan Poe. The magazine was credited for its ability to influence fashion trends for not only women, but domestic architecture. It even published house plans that were then copied by builders all over the country. Sarah retired from Godey's Ladies Book in 1817 at the age of 1989. By that time, the magazine was slowly dropping in popularity. As the women's suffrage and rights movements were gaining steam, the magazine was too conservative and it began to drop subscribers in the 1850s and lost ground to more with times magazines like Peterson's Magazine, Harper's, and Atlantic. The magazine folded in 1898. Sarah's final words to her readers in the December 1877 issue, quote, "And now, having reached my 90th year, I must bid farewell to my countrywomen with the hope that this work of half a century may be blessed to the furtherance of their happiness and usefulness in their divinely appointed sphere. New avenues for higher culture and for good works are opening before them, which 50 years ago were unknown. That they may improve these opportunities and be faithful to their higher vocation is my heartfelt prayer." End quote. In that same year of 1877, Thomas Edison spoke the opening lines of Mary's Lamb as the first speech ever recorded on his newest invention, the phonograph. Sarah Josepha Hale died on April 30th, 1879 at her home at 1413 Locust Street in Philadelphia at the age of 90. She is buried at Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. A blue historical marker is at 922 Spruce Street, where her home originally was. She fell into obscurity for most of the 20th century for her views on and for women until feminist scholars rediscovered her in the 1990s. Liberty Ship number 1538 was named in Sarah's honor. The SS Sarah J. Hale was built during World War II in 1943 and was scrapped in 1972. The literary prize, the Sarah Josepha Hale Award, is named in her honor. Notable winners of the award is Arthur Miller in 1990, Julia Alvarez in 2017, and Robert Frost in 1956. She is commemorated on the Boston Women's Heritage Trail, and the most American honor someone could possibly get. Sarah was the fourth in a series of historical bobblehead dolls made by the New Hampshire Historical Society and sold it in their museum store in Concord, New Hampshire. That's peaking. And to end this in a lovely bow, 70 years after her crusade, the United States Senate and House of Representatives passed a bill establishing Thanksgiving would happen annually on the fourth Thursday of November. And on November 26, 1941, then President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed it into law, making Thanksgiving an official national holiday. There you go. The story of how Thanksgiving became a national holiday, and surprisingly, a story about the woman who made Mary Had a Little Lamb. I was just looking for a woman to tie in with Thanksgiving, see what I could find there, and then I found her, who she is the mother of Thanksgiving, so that was perfect. And then I found out that she made Mary Had a Little Lamb. Oh yeah, she was coming in. Oh yeah, she was happening. Oh, absolutely, she was happening. Please tell me in the comments if you really believe that Sarah actually wrote the poem, or if it is based on an actual story. Please let me know your thoughts about that. If you learned something today, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're down there, please leave a friendly comment. I will be back I will not be back next week, because next week is Thanksgiving. So I'm taking next week off, and I will be back the final week of November. Hope you have a wonderful, safe, tummy full Thanksgiving parading, footballing Thanksgiving, everybody.
Come